As an individual providing services to adults with developmental disabilities, you are a mandatory reporter according to Oregon law. According to the law, if you have reasonable cause to believe an adult with developmental disabilities who is receiving services has been abused, or that any person with whom you come in contact with in your job has abused such an adult, you must immediately report the abuse to the Community Developmental Disability Program and to a local law enforcement agency when there is reason to believe a crime was committed. When applicable, you should also follow your agency policies and procedures so that immediate steps are taken to protect the victim of abuse. We serve individuals identified as having a developmental disability or intellectual disability and who have been recognized as having severe adaptive impairment. These individuals reside in in-home settings, foster care settings, and group home settings in our community and receive different levels of services and supports based on individual needs. A developmental disability originates during birth or childhood and is expected to continue indefinitely. It substantially restricts the individual's ability to function in several major life activities. An intellectual disability is a form of developmental disability. It is characterized by significant limitations in reasoning, learning, problem solving, and adaptive behavior. IQ is generally 69 or lower in people with intellectual disabilities. So what are our client and customer rights? They should be treated as an adult with respect and dignity, receive appropriate care and services, and prompt medical care as needed, a safe and secure environment, be free from mental and physical abuse, be free from financial exploitation, participate in activities of social, religious, and community groups, have medical and personal information kept confidential, be free from chemical or physical restraints, except as ordered by a physician or other qualified practitioners, be informed by his or her medical condition and the right to consent or refuse treatment. Adult Protective Services. CLCM is responsible for offering protective services for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are at least 18 years of age and reside in Josephine, Douglas, Curry, and Coos counties. These services are provided when abuse or neglect is suspected. Adult abuse may include unusual death, neglect of care or neglect of supports, physical violence or unexplained physical injuries, financial exploitation, abandonment, emotional and verbal mistreatment, violation of a person's rights, sexual exploitation, and harassment. Many community professionals, including service providers, direct care staff, medical professionals, social workers, and police officers, are mandatory reporters of adult abuse. This includes you. Abuse of an adult with disabilities means any of the following: abandonment, death, financial exploitation, involuntary seclusion, neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, wrongful restraint, and verbal abuse. Abandonment can be defined as the desertion or willful forsaking of an adult or the withdrawal or neglect of duties and obligations owed to an adult by a caregiver or another person. Death is investigated when the cause of death is something other than an accidental or natural means, or when death occurs in unusual circumstances. Financial exploitation can be defined as wrongfully taking the assets, funds, or property belonging to or intended for the use of an adult. Alarming an adult by conveying a threat to wrongfully take or appropriate money or property of the adult if the adult would reasonably believe that the threat conveyed would be carried out. Misappropriating, misusing, or transferring without authorization any money from any account held jointly or singly by an adult. Failing to use the income or assets of an adult effectively for the support and maintenance of the adult. Effectively means use of income or assets for the benefit of an adult. Involuntary seclusion can be defined as abuse when the involuntary seclusion of an adult is for the convenience of a caregiver or to discipline an adult. Involuntary seclusion may include placing restrictions on an adult's freedom of movement by restriction to his or her room or a specific area, or restriction from access to ordinarily accessible areas to the facility, residence, or program, unless agreed to by the individual support plan team included in an improved behavioral support plan or included in a brokerage plan's specialized support. Restriction may be permitted on an emergency or short-term basis when an adult's presence would pose a risk to health or safety to the adult or others. Neglect can be defined as active or passive failure to provide the care, supervision, or services necessary to maintain the physical and mental health of an adult that may result in physical harm or significant emotional harm to the adult. Services include, but are not limited to, the provision of food, clothing, medicine, housing, medical services, assistance with bathing or personal hygiene, or any other service essential to the well-being of an adult. Failure of a caregiver to make a reasonable effort to protect an adult from abuse, and withholding of services necessary to maintain the health and well-being of an adult, which leads to physical harm of the adult. Physical abuse can be defined as any physical injury by other than accidental means or that appears to be a variance with the explanation given for the injury. Willful infliction of physical pain or injury. Physical abuse is presumed to cause physical injury, including pain, to adults otherwise incapable of expressing pain. Sexual abuse can be defined as an act that constitutes a crime, such as rape in the first degree, sodomy in the first degree, unlawful penetration in the first degree, sexual abuse in the third degree, public indecency, and private indecency. Sexual contact with a non-consenting adult or with an adult considered incapable of consenting to a sexual act. Sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, or inappropriate exposure to sexually explicit material or language, including requests for sexual favors. Sexual harassment or exploitation includes, but is not limited to, sexual contact or failures to discourage sexual contact between an employee of a community facility or community program, provider, or other caregiver and an adult. For situations other than those involving an employee, provider, or other caregiver and an adult, sexual harassment or exploitation means unwelcome physical sexual contact and other physical conduct directed towards an adult. Any sexual contact between an employee of a facility or paid caregiver and an adult served by the facility or caregiver. Sexual abuse does not mean consensual sexual contact between an adult and a paid caregiver who is the spouse or partner of an adult. Any sexual contact that is achieved through force, trickery, threat, or coercion. Any sexual contact between an adult with a developmental disability and a relative of the person with a developmental disability other than a spouse or partner. Relative means a parent, grandparent, children, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, niece, nephew, half-brother, half-sister, step-parent, or stepchild. As defined in ORS 136.305, sexual contact means any touching of the sexual or other intimate parts of the actor for the purpose of arousing or gratifying the sexual desire of either party. Wrongful restraint can be defined as a wrongful use of a physical or chemical restraint, excluding an active restraint prescribed by a licensed physician, by any adult support team approved plan, or in connection with a court order. Wrongful restraint does not include physical emergency restraint to prevent immediate injury to an adult who is in danger of physically harming himself or herself or others, provided only that the degree of force reasonably necessary for protection is used for the least amount of time necessary. Verbal abuse includes threatening significant physical or emotional harm to an adult through the use of derogatory or inappropriate names, insults, verbal assaults, profanity, and ridicule. Harassment, coercion, punishment, deprivation, threats, implied threats, intimidation, humiliation, mental cruelty, or inappropriate sexual comments. A threat to withhold services or supports, including an implied or direct threat of termination of services. Services include, but are not limited to, the provision of food, clothing, medicine, housing, medical services, assistance with bathing or personal hygiene, or any other service essential to the well-being of an adult. For purpose of this section, verbal conduct includes, but is not limited to, the use of oral, written, or gestured communication that is directed to an adult or within their hearing distance, or sight if gestured, regardless of their ability to comprehend. In this circumstance, the assessment of the conduct is based on a reasonable person's standard. The emotional harm that can result from verbal abuse may include, but is not limited to, anguish, distress, or fear. Where does it start? Incident reports. An incident report, as defined in OAR 411-328-0560, must be placed in the record for an individual upon injury, accident, act of physical aggression, or unusual incident. The incident report must include conditions prior to or leading to the incident, a description of the incident, staff response at the time, and follow-up to be taken to prevent a reoccurrence of the incident. Phone contact, email, face-to-face contact, or referrals from other organizations. After the incident report is completed, it is reviewed and screened internally by supervisory staff for abuse, future interventions, patterns of behavioral or medical issues. After undergoing internal processes, the incident report is then submitted to the resident's or trainee's service coordinator for screening. The service coordinator also follows internal processes, including forwarding the report to the PSI to ensure the health and safety of the resident or trainee is being met per Oregon administrative rules. PSI reviews the incident report to identify if the incident in question appears to violate the previously discussed OARs. If it does not, it is then placed into the client's personal file. But what if there are questions regarding the incident or the report is unclear? Supervisory staff, service coordinators, or PSIs will make direct inquiry to staff providing the documentation. Staff may then be requested to expand upon the report based on these specific inquiries. And what if the incident in question does not meet the ORA for abuse but violates internal policies or actions may lead to further abuse? Depending on the situation, a team meeting may be held to ensure that the health and safety of the client is met. PSI, supervisory staff, CDDP program director may also make recommendations regarding the future care of the individual, and next steps will be documented. PSI will report the incident in question as a county review. Identify the area of concern and the manner in which they will avoid this situation in the future. What if the incident in question does appear to meet the OAR for abuse? The provider organization, legal guardian, service coordinator will be notified of the potential abuse and an investigation will be assigned. The provider agency will then follow internal policies regarding accused persons and alleged victim. PSI and/or law enforcement will gather all pertinent information and conduct interviews with the involved parties to reach an accurate conclusion. PSI will then complete a report identifying this process as well as the conclusion and any required actions. It is then submitted and processed by Oregon Adult Abuse and Prevention Investigations. After the report has been reviewed and signed by PSI, CDDP Program Director, and the Regional Abuse and Investigations Coordinator, a redacted copy of the report is provided to the AV's provider organization, and the APAV and AV's legal guardian are notified of the outcome. A redacted copy of the completed report can be requested in writing. All required actions will be completed as identified in the report.